Good morning, good afternoon, good evening for those of you tuning in to this week's episode of the Live Better at Home podcast. I'm your host, Fee Gentry, and y'all, today we've got a dynamic guest talking about the money. So let me give you a few deets on today's guest. Joy Martin is a trusted financial advisor here in Houston, Texas, dedicated to helping families build financial confidence and lasting wealth. With over 12 years in the financial services industry and 21 years of honorable services in the U.S. Marine Corps, Joey brings integrity, precision, and discipline to every client relationship. He helps families protect their income, eliminate debt, and save more and invest wisely for retirement and generational wealth transfer. As an independent advisor with the Leaders Group and Simplicity Wealth, Joy offers objective, personalized guidance backed by a slew of all these licenses, Series 6, they're 7, 63, and 65. Outside of work, Joey enjoys recreational aviation and family time with his 5 children and 2 grandsons. Joey is a licensed financial advisor, but he is not your advisor. So the information shared today is for general education purposes only and should not be considered individualized financial investment or tax advice. So without further ado, check out this next episode with me and Joey Martin. All right, y'all. So we are here finally with the guest of honor, Mr. Joey Martin. So we've already, got that great intro, but, tell me what's not on the paper, like about the bio, like that you'd want the audience to know.
Well, where do I start? I'm proud of the fact that I was born and grew up in the Caribbean. I often tell people that was a different upbringing, but it's something I didn't appreciate early on in my life, but I've come to appreciate very much. I also spent 21 years of my life in the United States Marine Corps, and a portion of that time I was a helicopter pilot. And one of those, I'm an old man now, but one of the things that I look back on in my life that I really enjoyed doing and I'm really proud of.
Awesome. So that brings us, like you talked about old man and aging in place. So those things that's a great transition. Like, thank you for that. Like, thank you for that hookup.
Here's a softball.
Yeah, thank you for that setup. We talk about the reason I wanted you on the show, because we met a while back, and you had this interesting perspective about finances and seniors aging in place. And we both are at that age where we have parents who are older and loved ones. And so this podcast is going to be, and this show is going to be specifically geared, or this episode is specifically geared toward seniors in the financial part. So we're going to talk about the money matters with regard to seniors aging in place. And so let's just jump into it. You good? You good with this?
Let's do it.
I'm gonna have to, y'all, I don't have my glasses on today, so I'm going to read these questions. So what is a common financial challenge that families encounter when planning to age in place, and what general steps help address it?
So it's a very important question. And my answer to that is the great challenge is underestimating the costs of long-term care. I've actually been in a situation where I had a couple who came in, and I'm reviewing their plan, and otherwise they would have been fine. But when you stress test the plan to introduce a long-term care situation, and they saw how their assets would have been depleted prematurely, it was a shock to their system. So, one of the biggest thing is underestimating the cost. And how do you combat that is you have to start early planning. You have to have these conversations, especially as you're approaching retirement. And I know nobody, you work all your life and all you want to do is enjoy some of your time before you have to have this conversation about, long-term care and things of the sort. But the reality is none of us controls when that's going to happen. And planning is everything. If you have a plan and it happens, then you're not in crisis, right? I'll take it back to being a pilot in the Marine Corps. Every mission we go on, we had a primary route and we had an alternate route in case of a contingency. Anything can happen along the route of that flight. And if something does happen, then understanding what we have to do at that point in time makes all the difference in the world, so we're not flying by the seat of our plan.
Pants,
Yeah.
yeah, like flying by the seat of our pants.
Yeah.
Pun
Pun
intended.
intended.
Pun
Yes.
intended. So what we were talking about, though, is like what general steps can help address that? Like if you had some practical steps of what do people need to do? Because yes, they might have long-term care or they may not have it. What are the steps to address that problem?
And this is probably going to be, this one word is probably going to be the theme of my talk today, and that's planning. Having the conversation early and planning. And you're like, Joey, planning, what does that mean? Well, when you start to have this conversation, retirement planning is about identifying where your income is coming from in retirement. So, I've got a pension, I've got some Social Security coming my way. And oh, by the way, we have this nest egg. But that nest egg in retirement is no good to you unless you turn it into income, right? So you first identify, hey, we need this much to live on. And oh, by the way, every year, the cost of goods and services that we need go up, inflation, right? And then on top of that, we have to what if the plan. What if one of us fall into a situation where we now need to be confined to a long-term care facility? Or if something happens and we want to age in place at home, what's the cost of that?
That's right.
Doing the research. Waiting until it happens removes options from you. So understanding what your options are ahead of time makes it easier to put those things in place that would help ease the stress and the financial burdens of experiencing a situation, an age-in-place situation.
Yeah, that's exactly it. That's exactly it. That's awesome. So how can families think about balancing current income needs? So, because people have to live today, because they're like, well, Joey, like you said, cost of goods living or cost of goods services, et cetera, are expensive, especially in today's society. So how do they, think about balancing their current income needs in conjunction with retirement needs with potential future care expenses? How do you do that?
A mentor of mine recently said at a talk that luxury has become the new prison. Think about that for a minute, right? So how many of us are driving a car that's a luxury car and foregoing long-term care insurance when we could be driving a regular car and putting the excess towards long-term care, right? We don't like to hear it, but Joey, I've worked hard. I deserve that word right there gets more of us in trouble than anything else. I deserve. But when you juxtapose that I deserve a luxury car next to, so if you end up in a long-term care situation, don't you deserve to be taken care of? Don't you deserve to still have a quality of life in case that happens? So it's about being realistic about what you can afford and what your expectations are. When I lived in Atlanta, I wrote an article for a religious magazine, and it was called "The Self-Imposed Debt Sentence," not DEATH, but DEBT, right? And I started the article by saying, if your 70-year-old self were to come back today and have a conversation with your 45-year-old self, the first thing they would do is slap you in the face and go, "What are you doing?" Me, your 70-year-old self, is going to suffer the consequences of the decisions you're making today. So take care of me. Take care of the 70-year-old me now. Start now to take care of that person.
Wow, that's powerful. Man, I hope you get to rewind that and say that. Like, people need to rewind this section and listen to that piece again. That's powerful, and people don't realize, at 45, that they're going to live 70. And now we have these super agers. They're probably going to live to 90, right? 45 is like halftime now. So it's a big thing. The next, I want to take us down another kind of area with the financial planning considerations are important for individuals who are supporting both children and aging parents. So how does, because we're taking care in the society, we're taking care, our Gen Xers and millennials, we're taking care of our parents, we're working, we're taking care of our children, our grandchildren. So what should adult children be also thinking about in terms of financial planning considerations for these individuals who are supporting both children and their parents?
So I have a couple of thoughts. My first is, there's no such thing as a retirement loan. You can't go into a bank and say, hey, I'm getting ready to retire. I don't have enough money to retire. Oh, by the way, retirement by definition is a total withdrawal from the workforce. And when you withdraw from the workforce, you don't have a paycheck. Mm-hmm. So you're telling the bank, I want a loan, but I don't have a means of paying you back. No bank is going to give you that loan. But you're foregoing or you're expediting the depletion of your resources so that you can care for your parents and your children at the same time. And so what you're doing is you're setting yourself up to be in the same situation as the parent that you're now sacrificing to take care of. And the second thought is you're demonstrating that to your children.
Yeah. Wow. Yeah. That's tough. Those are hard words to swallow. Yeah. Pills. Like that's a ouch.
Yeah.
That's an ouch. So, man, it's like you said, it's a juxtaposition of which one to do. Like, do you put on your own oxygen mask first then?
It's funny that I use that same analogy often in client situations. You're no good to the person you are hoping to help if you're passed out from a lack of oxygen. You've got to take care of you. At some point, we have to make the decision that we're going to be the change that we want to see. We have to be the change that we wanted to see for our parents. I just lost my mom last April. And, Dave Ramsey talks about this powdered butt syndrome. And the powdered butt syndrome is anybody who's powdered your butt doesn't want your advice. It's hard for them to take advice from their kids. So oftentimes, that information needs to come from outside of the family. So instead, it's a hard conversation to have. It's hard to tell your parents, hey, listen, mom, dad, you're getting older, and it's time for us to start putting some plans in place. Tell them you're taking them to lunch and take them to a financial advisor. Mm-hmm. Have the financial advisor be the bad guy. Have that financial advisor be the person. You know how you have kids and you can say stuff to your kids like constantly, and as soon as somebody else comes in and say the same thing, they act like that's the first time they've heard it. Same principle. Yeah. They don't want to hear it from you.
Yeah, they don't. Yeah.
My mom didn't want my advice.
You're never a prophet in your own land.
Yeah. So.
Wow. That's awesome. That's powerful. So I'm going to ask you this. And so what factors should families evaluate when comparing aging in place services with other care options?
So it boils down to cost and preference. That individual who is facing aging in place or an alternative, they're still a human being. They still have feelings. They have preferences. But you have to balance those preferences with what it costs. There's different levels of care. I've been through this with my ex-wife's mom and having to find the right place to place her. and there are luxury places that, the sticker shock is real. The monthly cost of being in one of those facilities is tremendous. But then aging in place too, caregiving is hard. I'm here to tell you, caregiving is hard. So you have to take into consideration, what does it cost? If we do it at home, I can't do it all by myself. What does it cost to have someone come in? And if both husband and wife work outside the household, are we now looking at paying for 8 hours of care coming in? Are we doing it? Is one of us at home all the time? And I'm here to tell you that if you're the spouse that stays at home, you're going to need a break. You're going to need to step out. You're going to need to do some self-care, and you're going to want to bring somebody in. But do not underestimate the cost of what that care, and don't lowball it. Don't lowball it, because there's an escalation of the care that's going to be needed if they're going to age in place.
Exactly. People don't realize that there is a cost to it. And like you said, and people don't know this, or maybe they don't. The sticker shock is real. So the base cost, the base cost to go stay in an assisted living facility without dementia, right, or without without medications or laundry services and all the other things, it just alone is about $6,000 a month, and then you start adding that up. So $6,000 a month, that's $72,000 a year. That's the flat rate. That's the flat rate. And then when you talked about the other thing is that when you talked about the economic costs, let's say if there's two spouse, a married couple, a husband and a wife, and the wife takes off work, she now takes money out of her retirement. So I want to talk about the economic piece of that. The economic piece of she's out of work. We no longer have two households working. They're already taking care of their kids. They were trying to advance in their career, and they're taking care of their adult parents. What is that economic impact piece of, do you talk about that?
It can be significant. So, when we put a plan together for our client, we call the basic plan, Shangri-La. This is like the fairy tale plan, because it has no stress tests on it.
Okay, got it.
And so it can show, we usually at a minimum, do a retirement plan with a life expectancy of 90. Right? Mm-hmm. And so sometimes it'll show, hey, at 90, you'll still have $300,000 left over. But when we go and we stress test it and say, well, let's put the wife in a nursing home at age 75. How long does it now take for the household to run out of money? And you start seeing that red line creep up. It's no longer 90. It can jump all the way up to 80, depending on the level of care that's needed. So knowing is half the battle. So when we do the stress test, we can now sit down and go, okay, what are learning now what our options are, so that we can put some plans in place, some contingents in place, because you and I both know that long-term care insurance, when you get it, before you're in a long-term care situation, they use these 6 activities of daily living. And if you can no longer do 2 of the 6, then you no longer qualify for long-term care insurance.
Exactly. Yeah.
So understanding the financial requirement, even if you pray that it never comes to fruition, that neither one of you will end up in a long, but you have the contingency in place in order to handle it if it does happen. You plan for the worst, hope for the best.
Absolutely. Agreed. And then my next question to you on that, going down that vein, what is one general principle families can follow to build financial resilience for aging in place? That contingency plan, I guess, that you talked about, or that financial resilience.
Yeah, and it goes back to planning, right? All of us are different. We all have different levels of resources. And so, Maybe you have to rely heavily on, government aid and government subsidies, but you have to plan for that too, right? There are some, financial constraints and financial limitations that you have to qualify in order for those, government benefits. And then if you do have the resources, there are things that you can put in place like, long-term care insurance that will, mitigate some of the costs and keep you from, becoming destitute or depleting your financial assets prematurely because you just made, $1 million mistake by not putting a plan in place. And now you're paying excess money, out of pocket in order to maintain husband or wife in a long-term care facility. The tragedy is you can go from having a great retirement to, being bankrupt and, the person who's left behind, because, let's be honest, no husband is going to have their wife needing the care and not provide it. A wife either would sacrifice the finances so that they can get the cure or the care that they need, and then that leaves no money left over for that person to live.
Right, to live. And to not transfer wealth to the next generation. That's what I talk about, the silver tsunami, is that the silver tsunami is not just about, people turning 65. Yeah, there are going to be 73 million people in this country who will be 65 by the year 2030 too. That's a fact. But what are we going to do with that $68.2 trillion of this transfer of wealth over the next 25 years? Where does that go? How do we operate in it? That's the scary part.
Yeah, we've got to educate ourselves. One of my mentors says that if you give someone a financial gift and you don't teach them how to manage it, sometimes the gift becomes a burden, right? And so, there's that study about windfall money, right? A person who gets a windfall within 3 to 7 years, they're worse off than before they got the money because they didn't learn how to manage that money and how to use it wisely. Everybody talks about legacy transfer. Nobody really plans for it. There's no money, there's no legacy to transfer if you're using it up at the cyclic rate. One of the greatest definitions that I've heard said is wealth is the money that you do not spend.
Yes. Ooh, simple, right? Wealth is the money you do not spend. Absolutely. Wow. That's a good one. That's true. We need to write that one down. That's a writer downer. And so as we're, getting ready to close out a little bit, I'm going to ask you a few more questions about what is one simple step? So we're getting, we've done kind of addressed all the problems and all that. But what is one simple step families can take today? Because a lot of people get paralyzed. They hear all this stuff and they freeze up to improve clarity and preparedness for future care needs.
Yeah, I said it, and I said this was going to be the theme.
Yeah.
It's planning. It's planning. In the Marine Corps, we used to say planning is everything. Yeah. Planning is everything. Is how we get intel from our guys who are out there collecting information on the enemy, so we know how strong the enemy is, what weapons they have, and if we encounter them, we now have a contingency plan of either going through them or going around them. Right? We now have when we no good plan survives contact with the enemy, we can come up with the best plan. It allows us to understand what we're going to do if this, and this happens. But we don't get to dictate when the enemy is going to attack.
Yeah, absolutely. All good plans are good until you get punched in the face.
Exactly.
I think of somebody.
Exactly.
Yeah, until you get punched in the face. Stress test, right?
But if you have a plan, if you have contingencies, and you go into it saying, okay, what if we get punched in the face here? What do we do? What if we get punched in the face here? What do we do? So it's better than not having a plan. Getting punched in the face with no plan is way worse than getting punched in the face when you have a plan.
So what do people need to take away from this talk? I'm gonna like just kind of open up 1 to 2 minutes, just kind of freestyling. Like, what is it that you would tell your sister, brother, a senior who's watching right now? What would you kind of talk to them about for the next 1 to 2 minutes?
Well, I feel like people our age understand this more than the younger generation. My statement about luxury is the new prison, I think makes more sense to people of our age, right? Because we're paying excess for things that we could pay less for. And then because we're doing that, we're foregoing or we're putting ourselves in a position where we don't have enough resources to plan for the things that are going to affect us in the future. They talk about how cell phones has reduced our attention span, commercial, luxury, fear of missing out has reduced. We have now become a society of people who no longer plan and look forward. We don't plan for our 70-year-old self, right? We're going to live, and, the whole, you only live once, young people, well, people my age say it too, but average life expectancy, that's not just a number that is pulled out of the air, right? The actuaries states have to plan. They track death data. They know when we are dying as a people, right? So when they said the average age for an American female is 88 years old, that means that on average we're going to live until 88. And this body, it's a phenomenal instrument. God did the right thing. Let me tell you something about this body here, but it breaks down. And so when you hit 75, you're not going to be able to do the things that you were doing at 65. And when you hit 80, you're going to slow down a little bit more. And for some of us, we're going to end up in a situation where we can't do those 6 activities of daily, and we're going to need some additional help. So it's not, the statistics don't lie. The numbers are real. 88 is a real number. And if you're blessed to get there, you might not get there on your own. You're going to need some help. So instead of eating, I think we talked about this before
pre-show,
that African proverb, the tree you shade under tomorrow has to be planted today. So stop eating the seed that you need to plant your shady tree. We're eating our seeds. We're not planting a tree to shade under for tomorrow. And then we're surprised when we fall into a long-term care situation and there are no assets there to provide for.
That's right. Absolutely. Yeah, that's it. You said a whole word, so thank you for that. How would people get in contact with you? Like if they wanted, like, what are the steps of, like, especially like, families that go, man, Joey, like you said that this is my situation right now. Yeah. Like, how would they get in contact with you? And you're here locally, or can you, you're licensed here? I named off all the licenses. Y'all know I named off, he had like 4 licenses, right?
Yeah. So New Jersey, I have clients in New Jersey, Georgia, and Texas. And so, and it doesn't matter where you are. If I have a potential client, in a new state, it's just a matter of, it takes me about 48 hours to get registered in that state. Okay, but, I just don't hold licenses in all the states because there's a cost to holding a license. And if I don't have clients in those states, it doesn't make sense to me. But my website is www.jmartinfinancial.com. That's one of the.
It's on your screen right now. Y'all see it on the screen. Right
one of the easiest way to get a hold of me. And if you're local to the Houston area, my office is located in Pearland, and everything starts with a discovery meeting. I need to understand your current situation. what you're trying to achieve. I need to identify what the challenges are that's keeping you from going where you are now to where you want to be. And if I could identify those challenges, then it's just applying the right tool to those challenges to get you to where you want to be. If you come in for the discovery meeting and I can't help you, I'll say, hey, thanks for coming in. I give you an hour of my time, but I can't help you. If I can help you, I will tell you, this is something that I've seen, on the multiple times, and I can definitely help you. But here's the thing. Sometimes I can identify the problem. I can identify why the problem is a problem. I know that I can help. But there's sometimes where those clients aren't ready to be helped. They're not ready to make the changes that are necessary to put themselves in a position where they can have options that, would help them to avoid those pitfalls that are in their future. We just want to live for today. We don't want to think about tomorrow. And the further we kick the can down the road, the less options we have to protect ourselves.
Exactly. Like as we always say, get it handled, right? Like we'll handle it. And so, Joey, it has been a pleasure, being on the show. We have more fun off camera, y'all. We're talking about all kinds of things, but it's been a pleasure for you, for me to have you, and our guests, I'm sure, the audience, to have you on the Live Better at Home podcast. And so thank you so much for coming in to the studio and hanging out with me today.
It was fun.
And so we look forward to he's a guy. I think he might have to come. You might have to come back. You might have to come back on the show
because you're
spitting a whole lot of knowledge. So thank you all for this week's episode of Live Better at Home podcast. I'm your host, Fee Gentry, and we will see you on the next time. In the meantime, live better.